South Africa's major cities dominating list for the highest crime rates on the continent at the start of 2024. 5 made it onto that top 10 for being the most dangerous. Let's discuss this with a crime expert and IRS forensic investigator, Chet Thomas. Chet, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on. Firstly, let's just talk broadly about this particular data collection point. How reliable is this data collection point? How often is it used, and when has it been in existence?
Very good evening to you and to the listeners on this Easter Sunday. Statistics are what you make of them, and when it comes to South Africa, especially when it comes to crime statistics, we always ranked up there as being some of the worst in the world. One of the more recent statistics that came out is that we're number 1 in Africa for kidnapping and number 7 worldwide, and there's always these comparisons with South African cities compared to their African counterparts. I have a couple of problems with that. Yes, we do have a massive crime problem in South Africa, but we're one of the few countries on the continent that actually contributes crime statistics on a quarterly basis to our international law enforcement partners such as Interpol. We're a country that is very up to date in terms of the way in which our crimes are categorized and the way in which the data is collected and collated. And it must be understood that we're one of the few countries in Africa that has a very sophisticated national system. We call it the CAS system, which is the Crime Administration System. So unlike some other African countries that perhaps don't have a national police force that police from a local, provincial to national basis and perhaps only police on just a provincial basis or just a localized basis, we are very fortunate that we have access to these crime statistics. So I'm always a little bit afraid to concur completely with us being featured as the worst. We are one of those few countries that are very fortunate to be able to contribute, and that goes a long way in identifying in which areas our law enforcement need to concentrate.
I must say, because one would be surprised, for example, if you look at the crime index, putting South Africa at the top in Pretoria, Durban, Johannesburg, Port Elizabeth, and Cape Town. And then underneath that, you've got countries like Nigeria, countries like Namibia, countries like Zimbabwe, Kenya, and Morocco, to say our crime index could possibly be higher compared to the socio-economic challenges that those other countries are also faced with.
We don't see comparisons with cities like Goma in eastern DRC or in other areas which perhaps are war-torn, or areas where rape is used as a means of war and violence. South Africa is up there because we report, and a lot of these statistics, I believe, are skewed to an extent. But let's talk about our crime statistics. You know, one of the most famous lines in literature is, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." It comes from a great Charles Dickens novel, Tale of Two Cities. And when we talk about South Africa and our crime statistics, and we look at those cities, we look at Pretoria, we look at Cape Town, we look at Johannesburg, we look at Port Elizabeth, it's definitely a tale of two cities when it comes to those specific cities themselves. When one looks at spatial planning that we've inherited, and we look at the erosion over the years of various areas as a result of the apartheid planning, the Group Areas Act, etc. When one talks about Cape Town being the crime center of the world, you also hear about Cape Town coming 1 in the world as a destination spot. So you think to yourself, but hold on a second, how can a city like Cape Town be ranked up there as one of the worst cities in the world for crime, yet at the same time it's rated as one of the best tourist destinations? I traveled to Rio de Janeiro in the early 2000s, and I was warned, you know, that there are these children that they call piranhas that will rob you on Copacabana or Ipanema, and that the gangs run wild. They don't. It's in specific areas. And that's what's happened in South Africa. We have a reporting of crimes. We have statistics that are collated. And when it's reported on this basis of a crime index, they're looking at it as from a city perspective, not as at a station perspective. The rest of the world don't know about Harare, Khayelitsha, and all these different areas. They know Cape Town. They don't know about Johannesburg, Soweto, Diepsloot, Alexandra. They know Johannesburg. They don't know about Pretoria, Eersterus, and areas like that. So it's a lot of sensationalism. A lot of it is skewed. But the reality is, we do have a serious crime problem in South Africa, and it really is a tale of two cities when it comes to each and every one of our cities, because you've got wealthy, moneyed communities that can provide protection, and their crime statistics are far lower than, say, your township or your informal settlement environment. So it is something we need to address. So when these statistics come out, it's a harsh reminder to us as South Africans that we are living this dual identity. You know, we came out of apartheid into the so-called Rainbow Nation. We had Mandelaphoria, but we're forgetting about this massive disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Yeah. And these socio-economic factors have resulted in us being put up there as one of the worst crime-ridden countries in the world.
Chad, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on this evening. That is crime expert and IRS forensic investigator there, Chad Thomas.